Transcendent. I'm Raya, and I'm the daughter.
And I'm Joe, and I'm the dad.
And today we're going to be talking about the emotions that we experience when we come up against LGBTQ issues. Some emotions are just easy to go away, almost like color forms that you just peel away. But some emotions can really stick with you, almost like a bumper sticker that gets stuck on and you just can't come off.
I've got an idea for a bumper sticker, by the way.
You do?
Yes. I thought it'd be cool to make a bumper sticker that said, honk if you speak like a goose.
Today we're talking about a guide to overcoming difficult emotions when dealing with LGBTQ plus issues. Both emotions that are produced internally from our own sense of anxiety about who we are, and also externally from other people around us. But not just for those of us that are in the LGBTQ plus community, but also for those that are allies, because once we start talking about LGBTQ plus things, there can be a lot of things that go along with that, no matter who you are.
And we've got two perspectives. The perspective from the transgender LGBTQ plus person and the ally. Guess which one I am?
The big thing that comes up when we're talking about LGBTQ issues is identity struggles. We in the LGBTQ community can be dealing with internalized homophobia or transphobia. I know a lot of people that really push back against even the idea of the label.
Yeah.
That we don't like to be called that. I don't like to think of myself as a transgender person. I still, nearly 10 years after my transition, will have days where I stop and I think, what? I'm transgender? What? What is this? It just strikes me as so strange. I know people that are gay or lesbian that hate being called gay or lesbian. There are people that hate being called queer or hate the term queer, hate the idea of, it all comes down to the idea of being othered.
Yes.
I don't want to be somebody who's weird or out there or different kind of person. These issues of identity struggles can be very difficult.
Of course they can. And there are things that bother us in so many ways that we didn't expect before. Before you came out, I never concerned myself with anything like that. But once you came out, in the very beginning, I was sort of afraid that other people would find out. Oh, no. I didn't want them to know that we had a son who was now a daughter.
Right.
Oh, I can't imagine how I could deal with that. But I wanted to be part of it. I wanted to support you. As you've heard me say on this podcast many times, either I accept it or I lose you. And
right.
I wasn't going to lose you. Well, of course, I've come a long way since then. And honestly, at this point now, I not only am proud of what you've done, I try to work it into conversation. So, well, we have a transgender daughter. No kidding. Yeah, by the way, we have this podcast. And I mean, I get to feeling really comfortable about the whole situation. And that's where we need to work our way. Not something that says, I've got this internalized homophobia or transphobia. Not at all. You've got this pride about who you are. I've got this pride about who you are. I've got this pride about being left-handed. I love to say
you
that.
You do. Yes. It comes up on just about every one of our podcasts. If there's anybody that's listening to our podcast that doesn't know you're left-handed, they have not been listening.
I think that's true. And Mom and I both are left-handed, and we think that is so cool. We're in the minority. That same percentage of people who are left-handed are the same percentage of people who identify as LGBTQ plus. So 1 out of 10 about. So we're kind of in that same group, in a different subgroup, of course. So actually, there are actually a number of LGBTQ plus people out there who are both LGBTQ plus and left-handed. They've got 2 reasons to be proud.
Right. And it's so important, especially for the allies, to be affirming to those LGBTQ folks that are experiencing these identity issues. There's a book called Unconditional, A Guide to Loving and Supporting Your LGBTQ Child by Talena Erickson. And she says, some parents are also concerned that if everything is on the table in terms of gender and sexual orientation, that the very fabric of our society will fall apart and all of our young people will start being super confused and trying everything. And all of a sudden, every teenager will be non-binary gender, pansexual. And the United States streets will look like something out of Sodom and Gomorrah. Take a deep breath and just think about this critically. For centuries, we have had LGBTQ people in heterosexual marriages because they wanted to fit into our heteronormative society. And she says, well, I'm sure they had good things in their lives too. They were probably pretty miserable. For centuries, we have had people who didn't feel comfortable with their gender, either conform to their assigned gender because they basically had no choice, or to pass as their gender identity and pray that they didn't get caught.
And if you want to hear an in-depth discussion about that, go back to any one of the podcasts we've done with John Paulk. I believe we've had 3, or is it 4?
3, yes.
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 And that was within the last year.
He bought into the whole idea that if he tried hard enough, he could change his identity.
Yeah.
These emotions regarding identity and our identity struggles can be so difficult. And yet, trying to make them go away is not the right answer.
Well, the problem is that people they absorb negative messages about their identity, and that leads to feelings of shame and self-hatred. No, there is no shame and self-hatred because you're in a minority. That really is not the answer. And that's really the message we're trying to tell you. There are ways to become what you really are, which is proud of what you are, to be with what you are.
Yeah.
It's not something to even consider.
Right. It's interesting that we have our different perspectives. And for me, as a secret transgender woman living my life who has been attracted primarily to women, I always looked to the lesbian community and kind of idolized them. I thought, wow. At one point I said, I feel like lesbians have superpowers because they were sort of living the life that I wished that I could live. And when I finally transitioned, I discovered a lot of people that felt that about me. And I discovered other people that I thought, boy, I wish I could be like you. And they said, I don't feel good about who I am.
Yeah.
And other people that have said, boy, I wish I could be like you. And I've said, I don't feel super good about who I am. Now, I've come to terms with it, but it's been a long road to accept being transgender as an identity marker, as part of who I am, because for a long time I looked at it as those weird people out there. I had a long, long time where movies and media and everything in our culture said transgender people are weird. And I thought, if I just try hard enough, I don't have to be like those weird people. And when I finally gave in, I realized it's not bad to be transgender, but it's a hard road to finally accept that place where you embrace your identity.
Not only is it not bad to be transgender, it is good because you become the real self. It's important to recognize that your identity is valid and you have a right to express it fully. I mean, doesn't that make sense? And I liked what you said earlier. You looked at some of the other people kind of in envy. And that's what they recommend. People recommend surround yourself with positive affirmations and LGBTQ plus role models who inspire you. I'm sure you all know someone like that. And if you don't know someone. Isn't that true?
Of course it is. To come back to the point that you made earlier, that the identity struggle is not just for us, but it's also for you, because you then had to come to terms with your identity as now the parent of a transgender person.
Yes.
As a loved one, a relative of an LGBTQ plus person. Maybe you're listening right now and you're a friend of, or you're a relative of, you're a mother of, you're a daughter of, or a son of, or a brother of, or a sister of. And you're trying to figure out, how do I navigate this new relationship with my loved one? This applies to you just as much as it applies to me and people like me. Because you can experience being proud. You can take that as an identity marker for yourself. Yes, I love someone in my life that is LGBTQ plus, and I am not ashamed of it.
One thing I noticed that was interesting, we had our first PFLAG meeting that was not actually a meeting. It was an event, a social event. We got together and I saw our room full of comfortable, happy people.
Right. Now, PFLAG, for those of you that don't know, is an ally organization. It used to be an acronym and it's no longer an acronym. Basically, it is just an organization of allies and people in the LGBTQ plus community coming together and saying, what can we do here to be supportive? How can we make sure that we are here as a resource? So we were so excited to finally get this going in our community, because there's a lot of people that are looking for their safe place. Where can I go? And we had a full room, as you said.
We sure did.
We had over 20 people.
No, we had 38.
38? We had when
Yes.
it was all said and done. Wow, 38 people that came that want
to
to
our
be
first
supported.
meeting.
And say, I believe in this. This is important.
And in that meeting, we had some very interesting discussions with people who took turns coming up and saying some things, telling us a few things one way or another. I would say for the most part, every one of those was a success story, which is really interesting.
Sure.
Because as I said earlier, if you surround yourself with positive affirmations and role models that will inspire you, that's going to help you embrace your own identity.
Yeah. It was very moving. I shared a bit of my own story and the people that were influential for me. And when I got to the third point, I mentioned 3 people that were influential, and the third person was you. And I got really choked up sharing that because of how important that was for me. And I don't know that I could have made it through without that. Yeah, it was really moving. And of course, everybody in the meeting said, "Wow, good speech." No. What happened is, I think it kind of set the tone for all of us being vulnerable, and then others shared their story as well. And it just was really a very, very a good time. If you are interested in starting your own group like a PFLAG or another ally group, reach out to us or listen to our podcast that we did talking about how we were getting that going. We'll talk about that more in the future as well.
Yes, and if you want to know how to reach out to us, it's just email us at transdescendant@gmail.com.
That's right. Now, that's not the only thing that you can do, are these things that we've mentioned, but a big one is when you're struggling with identity issues, to challenge that negative self-talk. We all have that voice going in our head. It's like a narrator that looks at the world, and that voice is protecting you. You're going about your life, and that voice is looking for potential danger, potential issues, and sometimes that voice gets a little overactive. Doesn't it?
You know what that reminds me of? These cartoons. I think every kid has seen them, where you've got a little angel sitting on one shoulder and a little devil on the other. Go ahead, have that cigarette. You know,
right? And we have that. And sometimes it can be hard to push away those negative thoughts and that negative self-talk. And I know I fall into the trap of, I think, well, if I just ignore it, it will go away. But it doesn't always go away. And there can be times where you have to step up yourself and say, hey, that's not true. That's not how it is. And I've done a few times this week here where I've found myself getting into a negative rut, and I've stopped. And I've said, hey, Raya, that's not how it is at all. Everything is good. And then I will remind myself of 1 or 2 or 3 points. And when I stop and take that moment to challenge the negative self-talk, then I remember things are good.
one thing I've noticed since I'm vocal about the fact that I've got a transgender daughter, one thing that I have noticed is that those who hear it, who are objecting, who are not allies, who don't want to join in with me, they don't let on that they don't. Oh, yeah, uh-huh. And they don't say anything negative to me, but I can tell that, oh, really, and
Sure.
And so the reaction that I was concerned about, that I was afraid of, isn't really there. It doesn't come out. It's in their head, but it doesn't come there. And I want to tell them in a very nice, in very loving way, you have no idea what you're talking about.
And I want to say how much it matters when someone like you, someone who is well respected in the community, a man speaking with the authority of all of the positions that you hold, and you are, a lot of people really look up to you. And when you speak out on it, people listen because everybody around really respects you. It matters when we stand up for what we know is right.
Well, it's nice to know that you think everybody respects me, but I'm not so sure they respect my jokes.
Hi, I'm Andy Barrett, a Lutheran pastor and a supporter of this podcast. I see Transcendent as a ministry. I've pointed many people toward these recorded conversations full of so much heart and care and warmth, as well as some of Joe's jokes, which are hands down the worst part of this podcast. But even they make me smile. I'm one of the many genuinely blessed by Transcendent, and I encourage you to join me in supporting this podcast by giving as little as $3 a month. Go to transcendent.com and click support.
We talked about personal identity struggles, but what happens when the feelings and the emotions that we're experiencing are coming externally? Because it's not all just negative self-talk. Sometimes there is negative other talk from folks around us, isn't there?
Oh, yes.
We can face rejection from families, which leads us to feelings of abandonment, loneliness, depression. That is miserable when somebody that is supposed to be there supporting us lets us down.
Now, wait a minute. That works also with the allies. Here I am, and I'm an ally. I can experience that rejection as well because I get it from friends or maybe even other parts of my family. My brother, I'm certain, who never knew that you were transgender, would have presented all kinds of crazy things.
I think there would have been some issues. And I hope that if he had met me and we got to talk a little bit, that it would have been okay.
Yeah.
But he lives on the other side of the country, or lived before he
Yes.
passed away, and we never got to have that conversation.
Right, that's right. But the whole idea of knowing that you're living with a family member and you are affirming and they're not is kind of like a Democrat and a Republican living together.
It's funny because I actually brought that up when I first came out to my ex-wife. I said, there's something I want to talk to you about. And I'm not ready to talk just yet, but I want to make sure that we have a good relationship and that when we talk about it, that you're in a place where you're prepared, because this is going to be hard for me to come out. I'm not ready to talk about just what it is just yet, but it is as big of a deal as if I had changed my political affiliation. And she said, oh, okay. And then she was able to prepare herself a little bit. But when I put it in those terms, she understood, because we were a very politically minded household at the time. And
Yep.
in fact, it wasn't just like me changing my political affiliation. I ended up changing my political affiliation entirely.
Mm-hmm.
But we do understand that. And so going through those times can be really difficult. You can feel like an outsider, especially in environments that lack understanding or support. That can lead to those feelings of deep loneliness and difficulty forming meaningful connections.
So
That's really hard.
it is. So what can you do about that? I would suggest that you embrace your identity and then find an affirming community. A community that, like, for example, we talked about PFLAG. You will, if you have a PFLAG community near you, you will find yourself very comfortable there in a very quick hurry. Support groups like that, either in person or online, where you can share your experiences and find connections with people who understand what you're going through. That's a big deal. But it's the same for allies. Allies out there need that same connection. People like them, people who are going through the same thing that they're going through. Don't isolate yourself. There is a network out there. It's as big or bigger than the network that you already feel alienated from. And to connect with others is so important. That feeling of loneliness will be quickly gone.
Great way is to build that community. And there are all kinds of resources that you can use to do that. We mentioned PFLAG. Another one, especially for younger people, is the Trevor Project. You
Yes.
can find at thetrevorproject.org, which is an entire group committed to helping young people through LGBTQ issues, especially helping everyone to stay alive, because these issues of shame can be so difficult to navigate. The Trevor Project is here for you day or night, it says right on their website. There are other organizations like there may be a GSA organization, which used to be called Gay Straight Alliance. Now, oftentimes, those are called Gender Sexuality Alliance. That would be a student organization right in your school. There may be other organizations, maybe your work has something, or if you do a Google search for groups around you that are affirming, you can connect with some people so that you can build that affirming community.
One interesting thing about that is when I say something and I look for an opportunity to say that I have a transgender daughter or something like that, it's so easy to find people who are also affirming instantly. You can tell they'll warm up to you right away. And finding people, might already be in your network. In fact, not only might be, they highly likely that they will be. There are plenty of people out there that are affirming. And the other interesting thing that I discover is people who've never said anything to me before about that will suddenly say, oh, yes, I have a nephew who's gay, or my best friend came out. There was just a movie on Netflix, Will and Harper, and it was two people who worked with the Saturday Night Live. One was a writer and one was Will
Ferrell.
Will Ferrell, yes. And together, they were closest best friends on that show. And when Harper came out as transgender, Will was an instant ally. And that movie will show you all about it. I highly recommend it.
Of course, it's not just groups or allies that we can reach out to, but you can also seek professional help. And that can be one of the best ways, because when you have a mental health therapist that you're meeting with, you know that you're in a relationship where there's confidentiality. They are there to support you. Just like when I go into my doctor's office, I know that my doctor has my best physical health in her mind. I know she's always going to give me good advice. The same thing when we see a mental health professional. We know we have the confidentiality. We know that we can say anything, and they're on our side. They're on our team. They're there to help us through. And we did a whole episode about that.
We did a whole episode about that on September 16th.
It was called The Remarkable Power of Therapy in Family Dynamics. And it's more than just family dynamics. It's there to support you as the person. And not only as the LGBTQ individual, but also as the ally. In fact, sometimes that can be just as helpful or more helpful for the ally who really needs some work getting through and learning how to be supportive.
I highly recommend that particular episode, as you'll hear Raya speaking how beneficial it was for her and why everyone should consider something like that, especially if you have some of those things that are concerning you right now.
So these emotions that we deal with, whether they're coming from inside of us or outside of us, can present challenges to us to overcome. But if we know the right way to get through that, we're going to overcome those challenges. But there's one thing that will never present you a challenge, and that is this podcast. We are here for you every Monday morning, bringing a voice of positivity to brighten your day and get you going in the week.
And we're going to continue to do that week after week after week. And by the time we get to the first of the year, which isn't all that far away, we're going to have some new surprises for you as well. I can't wait to tell you about it.
I'm excited with what we have coming up. We've done a lot of planning and talking about these things. I think you'll like it, what we have.
I know you'll like it, because if you don't, you won't come back. But with that, we'll see you Monday.